The answer is always yes. Well, mostly yes. As often as we can, the answer should be yes. Sometimes no, for very good reason. We fear change, we fear risk, but in my experience, without change, without risk, we do not move forward. We do not open our hearts to this crazy, scary, but ultimately wonderful world. That has been my experience. Let me share my story. I grew up in the leafy, quiet, gentle, slightly conservative suburb of North Balwyn. Perhaps extremely conservative. I come from a very, very quiet home. Mum and Dad were teetotalers. They were gentle, they were quiet. But every Sunday afternoon, after Sunday school, church, roast dinner, world of sport, a drive to the Dandenongs with Nana, we would drop in on my cousins, Bill and Peter. And all of a sudden, after years of entering the house and turning left and going out to the backyard playing football and cricket, suddenly, around about 1965, we turned right and we walked down the long, dark corridor into the den. And in the den, we would listen to the Rolling Stones. And only the Rolling Stones. I remember one day I had the temerity to ask, what about the Beatles? They were shocked. I thought they were going to throw me out of the house. But the Rolling Stones became everything for me, and I realised later that it was the complete opposite to my home. My home was gentle and good and kind and loving, all vitally important, but it lacked a little bit of danger. It lacked a little bit of fear, perhaps, and that's what the Rolling Stones gave me. The Rolling Stones gave me another look at the world, and through the Rolling Stones I discovered blues, I discovered Bob Dylan, I discovered poetry, I discovered a whole other way of looking at the world, and my parents were quite happy for me to do that. My parents said yes, and I said yes. Professionally, I was a primary school teacher. I taught for 3 years at Wesley College. I took a year off and I fell into a job at The Last Laugh. And The Last Laugh, a bit like the Rolling Stones, was a complete new world. I worked there for 6 months. I travelled overseas for 6 months. I fell in love with a girl from Seattle. We fell out of love, but we had a good time. And I hitchhiked all around America, and my mind was beautifully blown. But I came back and I thought, no, I'll go back to teaching. So I went back and I taught for another 3 years at Kingswood College in Box Hill. But I always had this hankering for a little bit of travel and a little bit of The Last Laugh. I'm not sure if people remember The Last Laugh, but it was a theatre restaurant in Smith Street, Collingwood. You walked in, you sat down, you had a meal, and you watched an incredible show. And again, like the Rolling Stones, it was different, it was unusual, and it lit something inside of me. So after 3 years at Kingswood College, I just could feel a yearning, and I could feel a need to move and to change. And I remember the final day, or the final weeks of teaching at Kingswood College, my grade 4 classroom looked out onto a side street, and the people who would walk up and down that side street, they had a look of freedom about them. And I was starting to feel trapped. I did love teaching. I loved the idea of spending a whole year with a group of students, watching them grow, but I knew I had to get out. So I went back to The Last Laugh. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I wanted to be there. And every night we would serve the I'll call it food, because it was. We would serve the meals, and then the idea was that the waiters would all sit in the front room and have our dinner. But I used to sneak in and watch the show. And every night I watched the show. I watched the same show often. I think it was Mama's Little Horror Show that ran for about 18 weeks. And it was explosive and wild. And at the end of every show they played That's All There Is. Is that all there is? Peggy Lee. And I started wondering, is that all there is? But I realised after a while that I wasn't watching the show anymore. I was watching the audience. I was looking at their faces, the happiness and the laughter. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I realised, it struck me, I want to be on stage. I want to make people laugh. I want to engage people. I don't want to go back to teaching. I want to be on stage, but how was I going to do it? I had no training. I'd taught for 6 years. I'd tried to entertain and capture the imagination of 30 children every day for 6 years. But I wanted to be up on that stage, but I couldn't quite work out how was I going to do it. Well, someone must have realised, because a guy came up to me one night and he said, "Do you want to be in the show tomorrow night?" I thought, yes. But what am I going to do? He said, "You just got to make them laugh." I said, "Yeah, but how?" He said, "Well, tell a joke." I didn't know any jokes. He said, "Just do what you're good at. Do what you do well, boy." And what I did pretty well was footy or cricket. I couldn't do that. And I thought, yes, poetry. I can write poetry. My best teacher was Miles Stanmore, Stubby Stanmore. He was about this big, but every day he hopped on a box and wrote a poem on the blackboard. Whatever was happening in the outside world, Stubby Stanmore had a poem. And I thought it was incredible that in a few short lines you could sum up the world. If it was grand final week, he had a football poem. Granny fell into the knitting machine. I beg you not to laugh. First she went black, then she went white, and now she's a Collingwood scarf. Or we had a girl who used to sit down the front called Maxine Mabry, and she had curly hair. And Mr. Stanmore found a poem about curly hair. I used to put my hair in rollers, such a waste of hard-earned dollars, till Mummy said, "Remember, girlie, bread crusts make your hair go curly." See my hairstyle, thanks to Mummy, partly curly, mostly crummy. I just loved it, and I thought, right, that's what I'll do. I'll write a poem. And yes, I discovered Bob Dylan, and in year 12 I had an incredible teacher who turned me on to a whole lot of poets, Browning and Whitman and Ginsberg and the beat poets and Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And I sort of had one foot in that camp, and I thought, I'll write a poem, I'll pretend it's deep and incredibly meaningful. In actual fact, it'll be total crap. But I'll sell it. So there I was, backstage at the last laugh. I had my poem, the curtain lifted, the lights went down, the music swelled, the music dropped, and then a voice cut through the darkness. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last laugh. Let's please welcome our first act tonight." Total silence. He comes running up and he said, "Who do you want to be?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, who do you want to be? Do you want to be you, or do you want to be a character?" I thought, yes, I'll be a character. That way, if I fail, it won't matter. He said, "Well, who do you want to be?" And I thought, Raymond, because everybody loves Raymond. J for my dad, Jack. Bartholomew's for a boy that I went to school with that no one ever talked to. And neither did I. And I always felt a bit guilty. "Ladies and gentlemen, please would you welcome to the stage Raymond J. Bartholomew's." I came out, I had one of those nights. You know how you have those times in your life where everything works? Maybe not, but I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Well, I had one of those nights and everything worked perfectly. And as I left the theatre that night, I heard footsteps behind me and I thought, great, I'm going to get mugged. I turned around, there was a beautiful woman. She was dressed elegantly. She said, darling, that was fantastic. Do you want to do it on TV? And my first reaction was no. There is no way I can go on TV doing that. And I thought, yes, maybe I should. I thought back to the Rolling Stones. I thought back to my parents saying, go out and do it. My parents saying, yes, buy a house with a couple of people. My parents saying, yes, live with your girlfriend, drop teaching and go overseas. So I said yes. She said, look, I'm working at Channel 9. I work for a show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. I knew it a little bit. This was 1986. She said, we've got a brand new segment called Red Faces, and I think your act would be perfect, which at the time I took to be a compliment. I realise now it wasn't a compliment. I went on, they loved it, and they kept asking. They kept saying, do you want to come on next week? And again, my part of me thought no, but I thought, yes, I will. And so suddenly I became a regular. I went on once a month, once a week, and I was in about 1 million lounge rooms, just like that. And then people said, would you come out and perform for us? So I wrote a few extra poems. And then I got involved in the show called Let the Blood Run Free, where I played Dr. Good, across from Nurse Pam. We fell in love, we had a child, we found out we were brother and sister. I got involved in theatre shows, I got involved in radio, I got involved in warm-ups for TV shows, rock quiz. Look, I just love working. I just love getting out there in front of audiences, and for me, the answer is always, usually, mostly, yes. Because you have these experiences. And look at us all here today in this crazy old tin shed, bowing down before the traditional owners, Massey Ferguson. If I'd said no, we wouldn't be here. And I'm just so delighted I am. I've been watching you in the front row the whole time. Your big smile, your crazy beard. You've said yes, and I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to say yes. True or false? The Leonard Cohen song, Lover, 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 was originally titled Lover, but the woman that he wrote the song about was hard of hearing. True or false?
Yes.
Correct!